to know her last name. She's a beautiful woman. As John knows, uh, that's her pinning on the medal. And if I can find it, here it is. Okay. This photo shows the same two after the consul presented the usual cheek-to-cheek kiss to General Ron. And I think, and I was standing right in front of him then, I think General Ron wanted to kiss her again, and that's why she appears to be backing up. She's a beautiful woman, very charming lady. Now this last photo is of the medal on the right is the Legion of Honor, the French medal. The one on the left with the oak leaf clusters is the American Army Legion of Merit. And although you would think that with that, the two oak leaf clusters, he only had 3, but he actually, I have a good source that tells me he had 4 of those medals awarded. Lastly, as you can see, I too am a veteran. Let me hasten to say that unlike the general, when the bullets zipped by and the mortars fell in front of you and the enemy soldiers were in your face, I was usually able in combat situations at Da Nang in South Vietnam, I was usually able to jump into a helicopter and get above the fray. So I am in no way the same kind of veteran as is General Ron, who I enjoy talking to almost every day over at the Mayflower. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. When you see the general, he wears a combat infantryman's badge, and anybody in the infantry wears that as a real honor. I was a typist during most of the war, and I was so upset that the Department of Defense did not create a combat typist medal. I'm going to work on that with Grayson. And now, as a Specialist 5, it gives me great pleasure to tell Major General John Ron front and center.
Got to give you some sound effects while I do all the things that are necessary up here. First, we have to try to find the disc for this particular program. And having done that, we have to try and make it work. Bob, you have your banjo? Yeah. So now we have to wait and see what happens here. Does anybody know how to operate a laptop? Nope.
You got the file name?
I'm trying to get away from this.
General, prior preparation prevents poor performance.
This is very true. And the problem that we have is that we had plenty of prior preparation. Whoops. Okay. That's the one I want right there. Now we go to Microsoft. There it is. Stop.
Where's the other mic? I want to turn it off.
I have only a couple of things to say about all the ceremonies to this point. The honor that I received from the French government is one that 5 years ago they decided on a random basis to select approximately 200 Americans who had fought in Germany during World War II and give them this particular honor. 5 years later, that is this June, they did the same thing. I happened to be one of those selected at random from the some 8 or 9 million soldiers that fought in France during that period of time. So really, I was not being honored. What the French were doing was trying to repay us for the assistance that we gave them in 2 wars. And of course, the assistance we gave them in 2 wars was trying to repay them for the assistance they gave us in the Revolutionary War. Because without the French assistance at Yorktown, the British fleet would have been able to rescue Cornwallis, reinforce him, and who knows whether we would be British subjects today or not. So that's the way it is. I was not being honored, but the American soldier was being honored. Now, this particular presentation that I have today is very interesting in that it came in on the internet. And unfortunately, 2 people besides myself saw it. One of them was Frank Barnes, and the other was Fred Rosenthal. And the 2 of them, or one of them, I don't know which, decided it would make a wonderful program for tonight.
Frank Barber.
What did I say? Barnes, okay. In any event, they asked me to put it on, and there's no text. So they said, would I write a text for it? And so I dutifully started to write the text, and then I found out all the deficiencies in the disk that I had, or at least the copy that I had. Sometimes the computer gets very angry at you and just stops. Other times it says, so you want to see pictures? And brrr, you get about 20 or 30 slides at once. In any event, in my research, I looked up at this little thing up here and I noticed that little shield up there. It has 3 blue lanterns. And I said, my gosh, that's Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, the Command and General Staff School of the Army. So with that, I was able to open up the program and find out that there was text in the program. So I abandoned my writing of the program and decided to use their text. Let me tell you about the Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth. Half of the Army officers in our Army go to Fort Leavenworth to the Command and Staff College. These are the half that the Army has already decided will possibly be successes in their future career. The other half are not going to be successes, and they do get promoted and they do fine work, but they are not the ones who have been pre-selected to be candidates to be colonels and general officers. So that 50% that go to Leavenworth, they don't have a sure path to success, but going to Leavenworth opens the door to that success. This particular program is one that is actually taught there to the officers of this selected 50%. It is a program that introduces their World War II in Europe program. It consists of 7 slides and about 150 animations, and that is where the computer gets angry at you, is when these animations are going. So let me start by going to the first slide, and it would be a good idea if I got my text out, because if you don't get your text out, you're dead in the water on this particular presentation. What I'm going to show you here is a map. The map is always the same. It is always a map of Europe. The thing that changes are the boundaries and the colors as a result of the various events that occurred during World War II. So let us look at the first map. This is the map of Germany and Europe as we knew it, most of us knew it, from our grammar school days. In 1933, the Nazi Party came to power in Germany. Hitler began to rebuild the military in direct violation of the Treaty of Versailles, secretly at first, and in public by 1935. The Western democracies did nothing. In March of 1935, the Germans occupied the Rhineland. that was the Nazis taking over, and here is the Germans occupying the Rhineland. Again, it was direct violation of the Treaty of Versailles. The Western democracies did nothing. Maybe one of them waved an umbrella. In March of 1938, Austria was annexed by the Third Reich. You remember the Sound of Music when they took over? Well, we'll try again. It did? Okay. There's supposed to be sound. Do we have sound? I didn't hear it. No. Anyway, there was the marching of boots that were heard, and that was supposed to drown out the Sound of Music with Julie Andrews. So, in any event, in September of 1938, we had the Munich Agreement. Britain and France agreed to Hitler's demands to free the oppressed German people in the Sudetenland of the Czech Republic. The Germans occupied the Sudetenland in the first weeks of October. There is my sound. And you can see that the map has changed a little bit. In March of 1939, Germany seized the remainder of Western Czechoslovakia. The Western democracies finally realized Hitler's true intentions. The southeastern portion became the Slovak Republic, allied with Germany. But watch now. Hitler's Germany, if you want to call it that, is growing. On the 1st of September, Germany invaded Poland. Come on, Germany, invade Poland. There we are. And the Russians are quick to counter the German activities and move into the rest of Poland. On the 27th of September, the Axis powers formally came into being. This has already jumped on me. You and I didn't notice it. I'm going to have to abandon my text and just go with the map as it is if we don't have. We have just taken over, the Germans have taken over Romania, Bulgaria, and Hungary, and they have declared alliance with the German forces. This has really jumped on me because we should have invaded Norway and Denmark by now instead of France. Anyway, in the Phony War, you could see the Germans and, rather the French and the British have moved up to the Maginot Line and along the Belgian border, and there are the German forces. Now, finally we invade Denmark. That is on the 9th of April, and simultaneously, the Germans invaded Norway. On the 10th of May, the Battle of France began. The Germans invaded the Netherlands and Belgium. Britain and France moved to counter those moves. And you will see German forces moving there, and then the British and French moving up to the Nederland border. German Army Group A attacks through the Ardennes forest. Two French armies and the British Expeditionary Force were separated from the rest of the forces. The British, as you know, evacuated at Dunkirk, and the rest of the French armies surrendered. The result of that was that the Germans then took over 2/3 of France, and then there was Vichy France in the southern part of France, plus the French colonies in Africa, you will notice, are still under the French flag. Next, we have the Battle of Britain, which ran from July to October of 1940. It was an attempt by Germany to obtain aerial superiority so that they could invade the British Islands from the French mainland. It was not successful. The Germans finally abandoned the effort. Italy attempted to invade Greece. They failed miserably. They lost half of Albania in the process. The British had moved in to oppose them right there. The Germans were not happy. So they immediately invaded Yugoslavia and invaded Greece and drove the British out of Greece. The British ended up in Crete, way down here. The Germans were not happy, and they made parachute landings in Crete, down here, driving the British out of Crete. Their losses were so heavy that they never again attempted a major airborne landing. June of 1941, Hitler double-crossed the Russians again and invaded the rest of Russia. And now you will see the German Empire at just about its maximum. The Germans actually got beyond Moscow up here. They went a little beyond the city, but counterattacks drove them back essentially to this particular line. And believe it or not, all of that was on slide 1. That is why the computer gets so confused, and why I get confused. This is Operation Torch, November 1942. The Allies land in Africa in 3 different places. Over here, and here, and here. The Germans, in response, immediately occupied southern France and Corsica. In November of 42, the Allies tried to advance toward Tunisia, and the Germans came out of Sicily and met them and prevented them from getting to the ports that they wanted, and there was sort of a stalemate there for some period of time. The fight that ensued caused the Americans to end up facing the German armies. Rommel managed to escape from Montgomery and came up to fight with them. Rommel proposed that the combined German armies attack the weak Allied right flank to attempt to cut the British First Army from its supply bases. And that is the attempt there. It was quite a fight. This was the Battle of Kasserine Pass, which was such a disaster for the Americans, but the Germans were unable to follow up on that particular victory, and the overall result was they went back into the same stalemate. As the fight continued, the 2 German armies surrendered, and now it was time to begin the invasion of Sicily. Both Patton's 7th Army and Montgomery's 8th Army invaded Sicily. And finally, the Battle of Sicily was won. Patton refused to obey his orders and reached Messina before Montgomery, and that caused even more problems between the two. In September, the British Eighth Army invaded the toe of Italy. With additional landings at Anzio and near the heel of Italy. Now, just prior to the Salerno invasion, Italy surrendered, and you'll now see that it's a Nazi flag there, because immediately the Germans disarmed all Italian troops and took over the entire battle. On the 16th of September of 1943, the Allied forces moved up the Boot to the Gustav Line, and after two failed German offensives in Stalingrad and Moscow and Kursk, the Soviet Union began the first of their major offensives. And believe me, they began to push them back, and you can see the German Empire is beginning to shrink. Montgomery is named the commander of the 21st Army Group, and the final preparations for the invasion of Northern Europe are completed. In the fall of 1943, with the fall of Phobia, the Air Force was now able, or the Air Corps, please, the Army Air Corps, was now able to bomb both from Italy and from England. And their bombing raids were very costly, but they had high payoff. In January of 1944, after continuous unsuccessful attacks on Monte Cassino, the 15th Army Group tried to break the stalemate by making another landing at Anzio. While the landing was virtually unopposed, the U.S. Army commander was very timid and did not link up with the other forces, and as a result, we had a near disaster there. The Germans counterattacked, and we have another bomber offensive beginning in February of '44. But it was a little different this time than the previous time I showed you, because the P-51s had entered the fight, and they were able to escort the bombers all the way to target and then protect them on the way back, which we will now. Then we had the Russian spring offensive, which you just saw, beginning in January through April of '44. In an attempt to draw German units into the Italian theater, the 15th Army Group conducted Operation Diadem and finally breaks the Gustav Line. The 5th Army linked up with the 6th Corps at Anzio and entered Rome on the 4th of June, 2 days prior to the invasion of Normandy. This is Operation Overlord. The landings were made by two parachute divisions of the Americans, one of the British, and the equivalent of about 5 infantry divisions in Normandy. Allied forces conducted airstrikes, slowed down, and even prevented German reinforcements from entering the Normandy beachhead. After the fall of Rome, the 15th Army Group was able to push the Germans north to the Italian peninsula, and they quickly broke the German Gothic line, but they couldn't go any farther than is shown on the map. They settled for a static line at that point. And just remember how big that German Empire was, extending way up to here, and all of this down through here was Germany, and it's getting smaller and smaller. This is the breakout in Normandy. First was big bombing. Second was the breakout itself. And third was the expansion. As Patton expanded into Brittany and into France. And sooner or later he would link up at Falaise with the British and Canadians and capture the majority of the German materiel. Many of the troops escaped. And this one is hard to find, but believe it or not, there is the invasion of southern France. Now we get to look at what the Soviets are doing. And Germany grows smaller and smaller. Eisenhower takes direct control over the battle from Montgomery and attack on a broad front toward the Rhine River. And they cleaned up France pretty quickly. There was an abortive airborne operation called Market Garden that accomplished nothing but casualties, really. And again, we get to go look at the Soviets. And most of us didn't realize what the Soviets were doing during this period of time, but they have conquered or reconquered a tremendous amount of territory. On the November 8th of 1944, Eisenhower shifted his main effort to the 12th Army Group and attacked the German West Wall. And believe it or not, that is the end of slide 5. Now we get into the Battle of the Bulge. The Germans crack through again the Ardennes forest and create havoc in the American lines. Third Army counterattacks from the south. And reduces the German bulge. The Soviets really had a ground attack, as you can see. They pushed back to where the Germany is scarcely bigger than it was to begin with. Next was the Rhineland campaign, where the Americans pushed into Germany. Crossed the Rhine and began the final attacks to occupy all of Germany. And I think you can see that there's not an awful lot left to Hitler's empire. The Soviets made their final attack. Hitler committed suicide on the 30th of April, and the Germans surrendered on the 7th of May. The purple that you see there is the American Occupation Zone. Next is the British Occupation Zone up there. The color is sort of yellowish. The French Occupation Zone, and they took the areas nearest to France. And finally, the Soviet occupation zone there. So now we see what happens to dictators who bite off a little bit more than they can chew. And thank you very much. That is the end of the presentation. It was what you asked for.
It was perfect, perfect. The name is Barber. Spec 5 Barber, remember that.
No, it is a mailbox that doesn't resemble your telephone number.
Can I have your microphone?
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, please, a round of applause for General. Just let me thank the Apopka High School, Marine Corps Junior ROTC cadets for the color guard, John Murphy, if he's still here, who was our bugler, Barbara Kennedy, Lucianne Lee, Bill Klein, thank you all, and certainly Ray Michelle, thank you all for participating in the program. Drive safe.